Holy shit, that's all I have to say about this election. It has been a long 18 months at that. And now we finally have a president. So all I can say is that the 2016 presidential election has been one of the craziest, chaotic, dramatic, entertaining, and divided election that I've ever seen or studied. And over 20 individuals ran for the office. And it came down to businessman Donald Trump and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And after emails and an Access Hollywood tape, we finally have a president, and that president is Donald Trump. He became the 45th president on November 8th, 2016. So like I said, that's one of the craziest elections I've ever seen. But first, before we dive into this discussion, let's go around and introduce the whole panel. My name is Jose Ortega, and I am a double major in communication and political science, and I'm from East Chicago, Indiana.
Professor Jonathan Nichols. I teach in the core program and the English department.
My name is Peter Monroe. I'm from Liverpool, England. I double major in political science and digital media and journalism.
Justin Hayes. I'm a psychology major, and I'm from Brownsburg, Indiana.
Nathaniel Wade. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm a political science major.
I am Professor Jordan Lysing. I teach political science here at St. Joseph's College, and apparently I'm also on the short list to be Donald Trump's Secretary for Veterans Affairs.
My name is Stephen Nickel. I'm a senior here. I double major in political science and business, and I'm from Benton Harbor, Michigan.
He's trying to get you for finance secretary, right?
Exactly.
So right before we dive into the general election, how about we just start off by talking about the Indiana state election? All right. Let's first, I guess, talk about the Senate race, Evan Bayh versus Todd Young. Were there any surprises from anyone in the group on that election?
At least for me, that one was going to be a toss-up. Because, I mean, let's face it, Evan Bayh had name recognition, but also he was, I mean, this was a year for basically anti-establishment Republicans, basically, anti-establishment candidates. And let's face it, Evan Bayh's about as establishment as you can get when it comes to Indiana politics. And so I don't think that, at least that didn't surprise me.
Yeah, I think that, like, the people were fed up. I actually knocked some doors for Todd Young, and a lot of people I talked to were telling me, how they were hearing all these things about Evan Bayh on the news, and how it really was frustrating them that when he retired, basically just up and left them.
I know the way I described it last week was we have Evan Bayh, who kind of just left and kind of maybe gave up on Indiana, and then we have someone that stayed around in Indiana, and it's time to give that person the job. So do you guys think that's what happened? That people saw it that way and thought, okay, Todd Young has been here, it's time for him?
I think that the Republicans had a lot to use against Evan Bayh. The fact that he was the former governor and senator gives them a lot of material to work with. And his decision to move to Washington just kind of reiterates that idea of an establishment candidate. So although it was a toss-up, and the polls were saying that, forget anything about polls, but the polls were saying that Evan Bayh was going to win. But I think Indiana definitely chose to go for a new face. That's how I put it.
Justin, what do you think about the Senate election?
Yeah, I think like everyone else has said, the fact that everyone was looking for an anti-establishment candidate and Evan Bayh was as establishment as you can get, the fact that he was looking for positions during the last few months of his office, looking for positions in private sector, and the fact that he ditched Indiana essentially just really, I think, is what put the nails in his coffin and allowed Todd Young to sweep into victory.
Nate, last week we also talked about Indiana's 9th district, which was against, what was his name? Trey
Hollingsworth and Yoder.
The brony.
You weren't at last week's episode.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, never mind. I guess, Stephen, you were at last week's
I
episode. So did that kind of surprise you? Because we had Trey Hollingsworth that was basically the Evan Bayh in the Indiana's ninth,
I think
where he moved in
no,
a year in, or a year before the election.
it was very similar. I think the problem was that that's all they really had to go on for him, and so they weren't able to make the same comparison as they were able to make with Evan Bayh, because Evan Bayh had corruption issues as well. But I also think that Indiana Republicans were helped out by people voting straight ticket Republican. So I think the straight ticket vote is really what put him over the top, because people were so, excited or whatnot to vote for Donald Trump that they just checked straight Republican.
You brought up an interesting point, Stephen. So we saw a lot of Republicans get elected to the statewide races. One of the ones that kind of really surprised me, and I'm sure surprised everyone, was that Glenda Ritz did not win re-election.
And John Gregg, too.
And John Gregg. So I guess we can move on to the Indiana state race. When we're talking about governor and attorney general and superintendent of public instruction. Do you really think that that's what happened? Is that people went up to vote and voted straight ticket?
There's really no other way that you can really explain it, at least in my mind. Thing about Eric Holcomb is that he had no name recognition whatsoever. Neither did the Glenda Ritz's opponent. I can't recall her name. That's how much I knew who the hell she was. It's easy there, Frank Underwood. But, it was just, let's face it, Mike Pence was not well liked in the state. And so it was fairly effective by saying that it should have been very effective that Eric Holcomb was Mike Pence's lieutenant governor. He was associated with everything that the Pence campaign probably was going to do.
John, I have a question for you. What do you think about the Indiana governor's race?
I can't really add much more to it other than what these folks have said. I mean, it was just indicative of the nationwide, I think, sweep of anti-establishment, pro-Republican enthusiasm that I think in a lot of ways a lot of people didn't really count on it. And as Pete somewhat alluded to, that forget about polls. Yeah, we really need to start forgetting about polls, or at least taking another look at how they are conducted and what they actually mean. Because, I just want to give Nate Silver a stern talking to.
Actually, on the topic
putting it politely.
On the topic of polls, though, I was reading an article. There was a small polling group in Michigan, and they predicted that in Michigan the presidential race was at an exact tie. And so, but they said what the data that they used that a lot of other polls didn't is they allowed people who normally never voted to participate in the polls. So I think you saw a lot of people that either hadn't voted in a long time or had never voted before come out and actually vote.
And if you look at a lot of those polls, especially the state polls, not necessarily, national polls, the national polls were fairly right on. They showed that Hillary Clinton was going to win, but by a fairly small margin. But if you look at the state polls, I think that, like what Stephen was saying, is that they really underestimated two things. One, the ability of the white working class to waffle between Democrats and Republicans, and also they did not necessarily count on what we would call unlikely voters voting. Those are the kinds of people who they aren't reliable voters. They're very much, they probably just got either really excited or they felt so fed up by what people have been doing in Washington, in state capitals around the country, that they felt that they needed to send some sort of message, and Donald Trump was that message.
Okay, so since we're talking about Donald Trump and moving more towards the general election, let's talk about that. John, what were your thoughts? I know you were with some of us down watching the election results. We had an election party here on campus. Mm-hmm. What were your kind of just initial thoughts when the numbers were coming out?
Shock. We had put a lot, we meaning people who our sort of political junkies, news junkies, put a lot of stock into someone like Nate Silver, and that this is a guy who really knows what he's doing. The guy can crunch numbers like nobody else. So if he's saying something is valid or trending in a certain way, I'm going to tend to believe him. And when everything went completely contrary, just about, to what the predictions had run, it was shocking. Not in that it necessarily that it was going against the way I wanted it to, but just anything that you were so sure on, and it ends up being not that way at all. You said no soapboxing, so I guess I will stop
But
there.
Nate, you were also at the party. What did you think?
To quote the great Justin over here, I no longer know shit about shit. Anything I ever thought I knew about politics or government or the world turned out to be wrong.
We're sorry that we didn't educate you well.
Yeah, I was reevaluating all of my education and all of my thoughts after that. I'm still trying to gather my
All your
thoughts.
human training.
Yes.
Now, Pete, I know you were down in Indianapolis
Well, I was at a different party.
with the
and
Indiana Democrats.
It
Can you
was-
really call that a party?
It was
though?
not.
It's like, what, 3 guys at Chili's? I mean,
Well, this is what I said at the time. I was like, this is definitely not a party right now. I mean, my anxiety was through the roof during the time. But have you seen the? I think it was the SNL skit where with Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
And, like, Kentucky comes in. It's like, oh, Republicans are always going to win Kentucky, and then it's like, well, Alaska's still out there. Like, I know. Me and Justin Meredith were like. We left early and came back up north, and in the car it was like, well, if she comes back and wins Wisconsin and Michigan, Alaska, and like every other state, and now we were just like silent the whole time.
I do have to say, there was a point in the election night where I sat there and it all looked pretty much red. And I was like, well, if she wins Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Wisconsin.
It's not going to be that bad. It's not going to be
Michigan.
that bad.
yeah, sort of. It's not going to be pretty, but hey, a win's a win. I'll take it.
And like
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle said, it's like, oh yeah, like there's 100,000 African Americans in Green Bay.
Yeah. Well, I think for me it was very reminiscent. I'm a diehard Cubs fan, so it was very reminiscent of the World Series. Like, you're down 3-1, like, yeah, you can do it. And that was kind of my thought going into the election that, Trump could win, but it's not really likely. And then you're in that game 7, you're like, oh my gosh, it's close and we're winning, and then all of a sudden it's tied, and then there's a rain delay. And
Well,
then,
Stephen, you make a great point. Back to Nate Silver, with that final Game 7, he did not have the Cubs winning that game. He had them, I think it was like a 60 to 70% chance in favor of the Indians. Thanks again, Nate Silver. But hey, I'm happy about that outcome. So.
Well, and I think what this is, because I just want to, I'll be the one to defend Nate Silver here. Let's see how I do. What this election basically reinforced for me is that human behavior is not as predictable as we like to think it is. We like to think that people are going to act in certain ways, but at the end of the day, some of them are not going to act in the ways that we think that they're going to. I mean, I think one of the assumptions that people were resting a lot of their predictions on when it came to this election is especially one thing: white working class folks will probably vote Democratic because they're probably going to come from union households. They're basically going to do, let's face it, what their unions tell them to do. And for the most part, I think, except for 1 or 2, I think, unions, they told them to vote for Clinton. That didn't happen. I think a lot of that has to deal with the fact that if you look at a lot of those working class whites, they are living in areas where there is, or at least they're living in areas where economic recovery hasn't really met them. I mean, if you look at the breakdown in the numbers of jobs created, especially and if you break them down by whether or not you needed a college education for that job or not, I think it was about tenfold the number of jobs created for college-educated folks compared to jobs created for non-college educated folks. And so it's just one of those things where I think some of the assumptions that we have to think about are kind of off in many ways.
I think one of the things that I saw in this election was that working whites did go out and vote, but also Hispanics and African Americans didn't go out and vote. Which is why I think one of the main reasons why
Yeah.
Trump won Florida.
Clinton underperformed in every single demographic from Barack Obama, and only in one demographic did Trump lose to Romney, or either lose or not be tied, and that was with whites. He actually had less of the white population than Mitt Romney did.
Well, that was one of the other assumptions that we made, is that with this election, we were going to see minority turnout in record numbers, because people did, Latinos and African Americans were going to vote against Trump because of all of the things that he has said, and all the things that some of his supporters have said about their own people, and so that
Justin,
just
why do
didn't
you
happen.
think these minorities didn't come out and vote?
Well, I guess I think the problem is with Clinton. I don't think she aroused the passion and the loyalty that she should have been able to evoke for people who were looking for that hope and that answer. People were running away from the hateful rhetoric of Trump, but then they didn't have a very inspiring Barack Obama-esque message to cling on to. Like, Bernie Sanders would have evoked much more passion.
That was going to be my next question.
Sorry.
If Bernie Sanders became the Democratic nominee, do you think he would have blown Trump out of the water?
I don't think he would have blown Trump out of the water, because I think, well, we can never estimate anything now, but I feel that Bernie Sanders' economic viewpoints would have contrasted with a lot of moderate Americans. The fact that he's so radical in that sense would definitely be his downfall if he did run in the main race.
The only problem is the capitalistic policies of what has been hurting so many people, like globalism, free trade. That is what has decimated those jobs. And so I don't know why people would run away from Bernie's messages when the totally free market is what is taking jobs away.
I'll give you a reason. So there's a book out there, but I can't remember who wrote it, but it's basically called "What's the Matter with Kansas," where you see white working class folks in Kansas, all of them, fairly destitute. The median household incomes are very low compared to the national average. And what do? They continually vote Republican, which, at least if you think about, what these people think about their own economic interest, that's not in their economic interest, because they're all about, slashing taxes, slashing regulations, that sort of thing. But one of the things that this book argues is that if you look at some of the social issues, these are all people who are people like evangelicals. They are fairly strict Catholics, those sorts of things. And so at least the argument that the book is able to make, the book makes, is that the Republican Party is very good at talking to them in terms of the social issues that they feel very strongly about. Things like abortion, things like gay marriage, things like religious freedom, those sorts of things. And so that's part of the problem, is that, probably some of those white working class people that voted for Trump, they also feel very uncomfortable with some of the, at least the fast-paced change that we see in the country. Let's face it, the country is not as white as it was 20, 30 years ago. And so I think that, even if it's just at a subconscious level, that matters to people.
Moving on from the general election, there's a lot of protests happening around the country. All right. One of the reasons for protests, one of the reasons I love is that people in California are protesting to exit out of our union, just like the Brexit that happened this summer. So I'm just interested to just see how that kind of progresses. I doubt it goes anywhere, but I just want to see how that conversation progresses. But one of the conversations that a lot of people are having right now is about the Electoral College. And as we know, the Electoral College elects the president, and it's not the popular vote. So I guess one of my questions is to Nate. I know, Nate, you had a family member that kind of described the Electoral College to you and was asking you how to explain it.
No, they posted, a link was posted on my Facebook that trying to explain it, what the Electoral College was. But, since I'm a political science major,
We never taught you that, did we?
I'm pretty sure I learned that in middle school.
Oh. I was going to say, did you skip that day? Is that one of the?
But it's, I don't know. I think the Electoral College, it has flaws.
Well, I know one of the
But-
flaws that I see, and just playing devil's advocate, I am in favor of the Electoral College. I think it gives an accurate representation of our country. But one of the flaws is that if you live in California, your vote doesn't matter as much as if you lived in Wyoming. Okay? Because in Wyoming, there's a less population, and I believe they have 3 Electoral College votes. And just the way it is that your vote matters more there than it does in California. That's the only thing I have with the Electoral College right now.
But see, I think to argue that point, though, you look at a lot of these states that have some electoral votes, and so their votes are more powerful. But the thing is, and this is the beauty of the United States, all these states have to work together in order for the system to work, as far as economics, as far as even just food. So if you take out, the people that are growing your food, in a sense, do you owe them a little bit of something? You're living in the city, so you don't really understand what it's like to live out in the country. And so these people are providing, a good that without you wouldn't be able to survive. So I think, I don't know, it's a complicated system, but I think it's the best thing that you can do.
I think honestly, my biggest concern is that you look at this current election. Let's face it, Hillary Clinton has, I think her lead in in popular vote is now over 1 million. It's over 1 million. You still have a majority of the country that voted for somebody who was going to be the president, and so I think that I understand one of the arguments that I like about the Electoral College is that it gives a voice to those smaller states, those states with less population. That's a good thing. They actually have a say in, because if we had a straight popular vote, where would presidential candidates go? They go to California, they go to New York, they go to Florida, they go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Texas too. They go to probably the top 10 most populous states, get as many votes as they could, and said, screw everybody else. So I think that at least one of the things that I would like to would advocate for is a mixed system, where you give whoever gets the popular vote, because let's face, how many times has this happened? This is the 5th time in American history that this has happened. And so
16 years.
You give, I don't know, a certain amount of electoral votes to the person who gets the popular vote, and then you have the rest of them broken down by population per state, like it is right now in the actual Electoral College. That way you have some sort of balance between, look, we understand that, somebody didn't win, but at the same time, this person got all of these states, that sort of thing.
But even still, in this election, that wouldn't have made any difference.
Depends. Honestly, it depends on how you would do it.
I have a question for John. Now, John, you probably remember a little more than we do.
Okay, first of all, what the heck is that supposed to mean? I don't know what's coming next in that sentence.
It just means you're old, John.
Talking about the Nixon
Older
election or
and
something.
I'll catch up with you later.
Sorry, boss.
Did people feel the same way in 2000 when George W. Bush won against Al Gore? Was there still this conversation of, why are we going with the Electoral College? It's out of date.
The same conversations did indeed occur. There was the same kind of division. You heard the same kind of, from certain camps saying, not my president. No, you lost. I'm not. And plus, what kind of tainted the water at the time was that the whole thing was settled by basically a court decision in Florida over how many votes were going to be awarded to George W. Bush, how many to Al Gore. So it felt really like it was out of the hands of the people a little bit. So, and pundits on each side debated the legality. In the end, we went with the decision, and George Bush was president. And so, yes, there was a lot of division. It was the first time I can remember that I mean, it's probably always been there. Somebody with a fine historical background could argue this division's been around since the end of the first Civil War. It's never really been resolved. But it's the first time that I remember feeling like there were these two distinct camps in America. But even then, even with all that sort of weirdness going on, and it was a weird time, there was also the sense of, okay, the guy won, let's move on.
Mhm.
It's all right. I mean, I voted for Al Gore, but at the time I'm thinking, okay, well, that's how it shakes out. It's different this time. It's different because of the rhetoric of the campaign. It's different because there are people who were on the receiving end of that rhetoric who really, if you try to see that argument, that they're not just going to roll over and say, okay, well, you won fair and square, Donnie. You got me. And why would they? So this time, I believe, in my opinion, contrasting with the 2000 election, it's much different. It is much more volatile, and a lot of people who straight up aren't going to accept the results.
You mentioned somewhere there, back in 2000, you're like, okay, let's just get on. I think we're at that time too where we're just saying, let's get on. So how about we just get on and talk about the Trump transition? So as we all know, my favorite governor, Governor Chris Christie, was in charge of the transition team. And then from sources that I heard inside Trump Tower, I mean, not that I heard, things I heard on the news.
Sources told your sources.
Yeah. That there was a lot of in-house fighting, and ultimately Donald Trump trusted Mike Pence a lot and decided to put him in charge of that transition team. So I guess the first question, the first question is, do you think Reince Priebus was a good choice for chief of staff?
No.
Oh, okay, but Jordan, you said no. Explain a little why.
Okay, so when it comes to a chief of staff, you need somebody who is going to be what I consider to be what is called a political equal to the president. You need someone to say, you need to back the F off. You need to calm down. You can't go this route. You cannot go this route. You need somebody who is able to kind of check I think the ego of the president. Reince Priebus doesn't have that. I see the same exact thing with President Obama's current chief of staff, McDonough. I mean, you have that. He's not that political equal that you have with Obama. Same thing with Reince Priebus. He's not really that political equal. The most recent one probably was Rahm Emanuel, President Obama's first chief of staff. You had somebody who was willing to say, dude, you're stupid. Don't do that. And who would have honestly probably used a few colorful metaphors in there too, just to make his point. I don't see that with Reince Priebus.
I think we saw evidence of it during the primary season too. I can't remember because it was so long ago now, but Donald Trump would say all these things, and you wouldn't really hear much from Priebus, even though he was the chair at the time for the RNC. You'd just kind of get walked over a little bit, I think. I mean, I don't know if I'm correct.
Yeah,
in
no,
saying that.
I didn't like the pick at all. Because, like, I agree with Jordan that you do need somebody that's going to call you on your shit, and Priebus is a yes man. Like,
Well,
if
maybe-
you look at the entire election, it was Donald Trump calling him names and making fun of him, and Priebus saying,
Same thing with Chris Christie,
This
too."
doesn't represent the Republican Party. And then as soon as Donald Trump starts winning, it was go Trump go, and it was like
I think
he
the
didn't have a position.
I'm sorry. The metaphor we may want to use here is he's Smithers
A little
from
bit, yeah.
from
I
The
would-
Simpsons.
I would say that,
Okay.
yeah, that's a
He's
very
Smithers.
good, yeah.
Right, immediately,
But
sir.
Are we surprised in Donald Trump that he chose a yes man? I mean,
Well, and here's the thing also, and you can also extend this out to the rest of his cabinet picks that he's going to be able to make. Let's face it, he kind of shot himself in the foot looking for people to actually put into his cabinet. When you're going after a lot of these establishment Republicans like he did, you're going to have a lot of people who aren't willing to be serving in your administration.
Before we move into the whole
yeah.
administration piece of it, I just want to ask the panel real quick. Who do you think Trump should have picked as chief of staff? Ivanka Trump? Newt Gingrich?
Honestly, I think that Newt might have been a good pick. Let's face it, I think that he would have been able to actually stand up to Trump because he did. I mean, he was fairly good at doing that when he was speaker. But I think just today he announced that he wasn't going to serve in any official capacity in the Trump administration. So,
What about you, Justin? I see you, doing the whole little chin thing.
Yeah, I guess I mean, this whole thing is insane. It's not in touch with reality. So what is good or bad for this pick? Like, it's just, this is the Trump show. So who can we pick that are we gonna pick someone who's gonna actually consult with Trump, or does Trump want someone who's just gonna be able to step all over?
Should have gone with Oprah. Oprah would have kept him in line.
oh God,
She would never have said yeah.
Oh no.
and what if she had said yes? One day, one day, one day, and she was like, "Screw it, I'm out."
All right, so let's talk more about the Trump administration. Let's talk about his cabinet. All right. Gosh, where do I start? Ben Carson said he's out. There was rumors that
Just didn't have the experience.
I know.
Even though he wanted to be president, he just doesn't have the experience to run.
It's either
He
the
said
president or nothing.
He said he doesn't have the experience to run an administration body, basically. So rumors were that he was up for Department of Health and Human Services.
It's the only one he would be able to do, I think.
I mean, a former, a doctor makes sense.
Yeah.
But or as maybe a surgeon general, that sort of thing. But.
Yeah, so I was a little surprised by that one. I thought
I feel like
Dr. Ben Carson would have done a pretty good job
Yeah, I feel like it's not exactly a political job. I feel like it's just being the head of
of the department.
a department in any business, which I think is good for Ben Carson.
Well, and what I find really interesting about both Carson and also Gingrich are the words that they used to say what they wanted to do instead. They wanted to they wanted to kind of maneuver through the political system in no official capacity, which begs the question, at least for me, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're going to basically try to be basically unofficial advisors in a way to the Trump administration? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to be like party fathers in a way where they're the kind of elder statesmen that do all these sorts of things? It's just really interesting how
Maybe
they
golf
both
buddies.
use golf buddies.
buddies,
Yeah,
there you go.
golf buddies. Oh God. I'd want to be a fly on the tee whenever Gingrich and Carson are playing golf.
On the tee?
Trust me, according to
Maybe.
That's
you know,
the
Trump,
worst place.
he does a lot of golf, and he says Bill Clinton has said way worse on the golf course.
Yeah, I can see
Because that's it's totally not hearsay, but anyway.
So let's talk about probably the most important position Donald Trump needs to fill, and that is Secretary of State. All right, so
Well, that's today's news.
so early on, very early on, there was talks about Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich said he wasn't doing it, and then the conversation moved to Giuliani and to who was the other person?
Today it was talked about Nikki Haley too.
Yeah, I heard Nikki Haley today, but it was Bolton before.
Bolton,
yeah, John Bolton,
Giuliani,
Mitt Romney.
Nikki Haley today, and Mitt Romney today. Also, Mitt Romney is having a meeting with President-elect Trump on Saturday, along with Nikki Haley on Saturday. He's also meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister on Monday or on Saturday at probably Trump Tower, and Mitt Romney. Who else is he? He's meeting with someone else.
I feel like Mitt Romney would be, out of all those people to choose from, I think Mitt Romney would be quite a good choice. I feel that he's very like.
Of all of them, he might be the most. I just don't like that list for Secretary of State whatsoever.
Me neither. But because I'm from like a different country, the way I see the Secretary of State needs to be very diplomatic and not hot-headed. Basically, like the opposite of Trump. Like because we have Boris Johnson as our foreign secretary right now, which is the opposite of what you want as a foreign secretary. He's too hot-headed. He's not, I wouldn't say he's like a racist, but he's from a different time, I feel, and a different era.
But
Yeah,
but at
the
least
other
he can
name-
at least he can sing the Ode to Joy in German though.
That is not qualified.
The other name that Trump is meeting with is former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. So maybe her tap him at the age of 92.
Yeah. well,
God,
Oh.
trying to get him to travel to the countries.
Oh my goodness.
It's just here's the problem that I have, and it's a little bit an extension of the answer I gave earlier, especially with Reince Priebus, is that he really shot himself in the foot when it comes to the people that he can possibly tap. Most of the people who you would think of as being competent, experienced in the places that you want to have, especially with Secretary of State. Secretary of State, you need somebody who's been in foreign affairs, and you need somebody who's dealt with foreign policy. And he is just not, he doesn't have that pool of competent people, so he has to go for yes men, which makes me, that as a citizen, that concerns me, because when you think about, appointing any sort of bureaucrat, what do you want? You need a walk a fine line between having a competent bureaucrat and a loyal one, and I don't think that he's going to be able to walk that fine line.
I think for me, and you guys might think I'm crazy.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I think that, and this is just from the experience I had in the primaries, I would have loved to see him appoint Carly Fiorina as Secretary of State. Because I think, one, she does have some qualifications dealing with other world leaders. She's met with them before. And two, I don't think that she could get walked over. And I think she would be willing to stand up to Trump. Because if you look at the debate, when she got baited, or Trump was trying to bait her to attack on the comments he had made
About her face?
about her face, the way she played it off was perfect. Everybody said it was perfect, both sides of the aisle. And so I think
I do
I
have
would
to
love to
say,
see
I
that
do
one.
miss Carly Fiorina. I was actually quite a little excited when Ted Cruz named her as vice presidential running mate back here in Indiana, actually. Anyone else have thoughts about Giuliani? Come on. Secretary of State. Nate?
I mean, this is one thing we kind of talked about in our foreign policy class, like how Trump thinks he knows more than everybody else. Generals, doesn't matter. And I'm thinking whether he had ruined the relationships with potential frontrunners for that or not, I'm thinking whether he would have even chose someone competent for the job, or if he would have just chose someone who's more loyal so he can just do whatever he wants and he doesn't have anyone trying to push back.
I think Giuliani's too much of a, when I think of Rudy Giuliani, I think of what he did at the RNC and the convention and his performance there. Like, he was so riled up and so shouty and so out there. And
Same thing with Chris Christie.
yeah, and I just
Basically put Clinton on trial.
yeah, I don't see that person holding an important office in an administration, especially where diplomacy is probably the most important qualification.
There's another qualification I'd like to address. The Trump is a man who, during his campaign, is alleged to have asked his foreign policy experts, "So why can't I use nuclear weapons? Why can't I? What's the problem?" The president can't do that by his or herself. It takes the concurrence of at least three other people. The Secretary of State will be one of those other three people who helps make that decision. So I don't know if I want a Giuliani.
I think we're recalling the decision because there needs three people. I
Like
wanna
three,
believe-
okay,
I
yeah.
believe it's the president, Secretary of Defense, and
The
the
defense is in
chairman
there.
of Joint Chiefs of Staff,
National Security Advisor could
Them
also
too.
be.
which I heard General Michael Flynn,
Mhm.
Lieutenant
Yeah, Lieutenant General.
General Michael Flynn. Sorry, there's so many rankings. Okay, so we're gonna play a little fun game.
Oh,
All right.
Yay.
Is it fun?
So, question, are there prizes for said game?
No prizes.
Dinner with Scott Baio, now the reigning chief of.
Wait, we have to have dinner with Chachi?
You're welcome.
He's probably going to be the chief of staff. Come on.
Jordan will bake us a dozen cookies. That's the prize.
Still waiting on that.
So,
Yeah, you didn't win.
Yeah, but Maya would share them out though.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Share them,
I don't
share
think
them.
so.
So I got
I
a
don't
list
think
of
so.
all the cabinet positions. I believe there's 15. I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna say the cabinet position, and then I'm gonna go down the line. And if you have a name that you would like to see on there, just say it. Okay?
I have no idea.
I
Can
guess
we make
At this
fun?
point, anything goes.
Can we make this
I mean,
fun?
I thought this was
Yeah, go
supposed
for
to be.
whatever you want.
Can we
I
make
thought
this
this
fun?
was supposed to be fun.
All right.
Living or dead?
All right. Let's make this interesting. Let's make this interesting.
Living or dead.
all right, and let's try to pick Republicans.
Okay.
Once
All right.
again, living or dead?
Living.
Let's
go.
Let's go living. Let's
Okay.
be realistic. All right,
Fine.
We'll start off with we'll start low and then we're go on high. Okay, Secretary of Homeland Security.
Michael Rogers from Michigan. Who it won't be, but
Rudy Giuliani, anyone?
No. Get him out.
I mean, if you're gonna put him in a spot, that's probably the best spot to put him in. But
at the
I don't
same
know.
time,
at the
it's
same
really-
time, you're still getting Rudy Giuliani.
Exactly.
All right, next one, Secretary of Veterans Affairs.
See, Rudy Giuliani is very passionate about that kind of stuff, but I don't know. Would you put a veteran in there somewhere, maybe?
Good.
I mean, is it
Good
been
idea.
You have to
filled?
limit of that. Yeah,
I think
so-
Trump
It
would
has to
want to
be
put a
there.
I
veteran
don't think it
in there.
has to be, but yeah, I feel like you want.
I feel like Trump would want to put a veteran in
I
there.
would hope that he would.
Put John McCain in there.
Yeah,
Todd Young.
Todd Young.
John McCain.
John McCain.
Yeah, would
McCain.
Would McCain.
John
go?
McCain,
wouldn't
but I
do it.
think
Take it.
I think the more likely choice though that he might think about, and I think this has already been floating out. His name has been floating out there with other ones, but Tom Cotton
Yeah,
might be a
he's been out there
possible
for a while.
one. I mean, I don't want to see him there, but that's another. It's a more likely one that I can think of.
Secretary of Education.
Ted Nugent.
Who's okay?
Well, I've heard I've
Trump
heard
Jr.
the name Tony Bennett being floated around out
Are
there.
you serious?
You almost went a little blue there. I've also heard my former representative Luke Messer from Indiana also being floated out there. But if
I'll be honest, I was homeschooled. I don't know much about this education
Daniels.
stuff. So.
It's PBS. Who's going to run
Mitch
Big
Daniels.
Bird?
Mitch Daniels.
Yeah.
Oh, actually,
Daniels.
Big Bird's on HBO now.
Mitch Daniels.
Mitch Daniels.
Seriously?
My man Mitch.
Dot. What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Me and Mitch Daniels don't get along.
You're not alone.
I'm just saying.
so, you're saying you're not
he's running
Facebook
for
friends
the-
with him.
I'm not
But it would
Facebook
make
friends.
logical sense
It's-
for
yeah.
him to select this. It is in keeping with everything else Trump has.
I think it
proposed so
would.
far.
It would make sense.
Wouldn't it?
That would. Okay, I have to agree. That one
He
would
is
make sense.
president of
Purdue
Purdue.
University, former governor.
Obviously knows a lot about education.
He went
Obviously.
to IU though, so it's a little. bit-
Obviously, because that whole Purdue Northwest thing is going great. Sorry.
Soapbox.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I gotta open this up. Okay. So, Secretary of Energy.
Really put a Republican in there, to be honest. I mean, I feel like most Democrats are more progressive than
Honestly-
many Republicans.
Maybe you should put a business tycoon on there, like one of the oil giants, the CEOs of one of the.
You might-
Oil
I mean,
giants.
who I would
All
like
money
to see. I mean,
names.
I honestly, I don't think he has. I don't know if he has any party affiliation whatsoever. But the person who's in there right now, Secretary Moniz, Dr. Moniz.
Oh, I love his hair.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, honestly, why wouldn't you want him as in a cabinet post?
Have you guys seen him on Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon?
Yeah.
He's great.
Look at him.
He's hilarious. I mean, he's fun, but he's
Moniz.
smart.
Yeah.
I like him.
Well, he has a I think a doctorate in some sort of engineering, either chemical engineering or nuclear engineering.
Nate Wade,
And
fact
so-
checker.
No, he just wanted to see what he looks like.
It's like, yeah, it's just so, it's
hair.
awesome.
The
Yeah.
hair.
Do we think he's gonna put all government officials in there, or no one from like the
Who
private
knows?
sector?
Yeah, with,
I mean,
with
are we
this,
gonna-
it's
No,
all
he's gonna put
progressive.
somebody in the private sector. I just don't know where it's gonna go in.
Let's keep on going. Next one, Secretary of Transportation.
Chris Christie.
Thank you.
I mean,
was waiting to
we
make
got
that
bridges
joke.
to take care of.
He knows
bridges
bridges.
to take care of.
He
Put him in
knows
charge
bridges.
of bridges.
The undersecretary for all bridges.
Oh my goodness.
Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Go ahead, Nate.
We're, ta-
Cleveland.
we're talking about real people.
Vince McMahon.
Gotta go with Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah.
Vince
Doesn't mean it
McMahon.
survived.
He has a
Come
great
on.
relationship with the McMahon family. He was on WWE numerous times.
Who?
Vince McMahon.
Oh my God.
Vince McMahon and the Trump train.
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah.
Secretary of Health and Human Services.
See, was that the one we were talking about, Ben Carson?
Mhm.
Ben Carson was being thought of for that, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Also,
heard
Rick
Rick Perry
Scott.
tossed around for that one too.
Rick Scott's
Yeah,
thrown out
Rick
too.
Scott, Rick Perry. One of my favorite ones I would like to be that I would like to see is former Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. I believe he
I think
was
he would be
Undersecretary
Yeah.
for Health and Human Services before being elected congressman for the great state of Louisiana.
Yeah, I think Bobby Jindal would be good for a few of these. I think maybe like the energy one. I'm not sure.
Both, I think.
Secretary of Labor. You see, now we're getting to that situation where it's like, do these people,
Labor?
Do we even need a department?
yeah.
No.
Let's see.
Well, that's another possibility, and that was I don't know if this will come into play, but a lot of times Rick Perry was one when he was running. Let's get rid of these bloated bureaucracies. Let's get rid of a few of these departments.
Oh,
Yeah.
Would Trump put this out on the table? I'm not saying he would, but who knows? At this point, everything's blowing up. I'm just going to cut these. Department of Energy, don't need it. Department of Education, don't need it.
Oh, and what's that third one?
Yeah, exactly. But would Trump maybe look at it or consolidate them, saying that I can streamline this process? It's like divisions in a business. I'll just lump them all together.
Streamlining. I've said that
Efficiency.
before.
Yeah, yeah.
Efficiency.
Oh! Oh!
I mean, I think that for Secretary of Labor, though, that could be the one spot where he could switch aisles. Because I feel like a lot of his rhetoric in the campaign was to reach out to those blue-collar voters and stuff.
Who don't
And
like
so-
things like NAFTA, CAFTA.
Right, exactly.
True.
So I think
T-tip.
that generally speaking is more of a left issue than a right issue, where you have the free capitalism and just let the markets go kind of idea, whereas the left is kind of more protect the people back at home. So I think this is the one where if you're going to see him cross the aisle, this would be the spot.
All right, we have to keep moving on the secretaries. There's a lot of them. Secretary of Agriculture.
CEO of Monsanto,
I have no idea.
Okay. Secretary of Interior.
maybe.
Anybody but Sarah Palin, please.
It's probably will be Palin.
It's probably what we're going to get.
They're talking about Jan Brewer, which that would be
Former Arizona governor.
former Arizona governor, yeah, which would be interesting, but they're also talking about Brownback for agriculture, which would be interesting too.
Governor of Kansas.
Governor of Kansas, yeah.
All right, now we're going to the fun ones. Attorney General.
Okay, if I feel like one of the only ones that Giuliani might be, eligible for would be that.
Does he get to cuff Clinton personally?
He'd probably enjoy that way too
He
much.
would.
See, I've actually heard talk on what they're thinking, and I've heard Trey Gowdy. I've heard even possibly Ted Cruz.
Yeah, I've heard Ted
Um,
Cruz.
Which would be
So-
interesting if they chose
He
Ted
did
Cruz.
meet with Ted Cruz
Yeah, he
and
met
or
with
meeting
him.
with him. I think he met with him today or yesterday.
I think.
There's a lot of people he's meeting with. Secretary of Defense.
Bob Knight.
Just throwing chairs at people.
Yeah.
Bob Knight.
We're just gonna go over
The chair
Syria and
catapult.
just-
Yeah.
Just gonna go over Syria and just throw chairs.
every single aircraft carrier has a catapult specifically designed to throw chairs. Throw more chairs, but why? Just throw more chairs. It'll work.
Is there a real one? I mean, not saying he's
What?
real. Bobby Knight's real.
Come on. What's real and what's not real in this election?
That's a good.
I mean, here's part, especially for the ones where you need somebody experienced. There's just not really anybody there.
Who else was being floated around for defense and Sessions? Was he in the
Sessions,
mix?
I think, is also Attorney General.
Also Attorney General? Okay.
Possibly, I think, state as well, but,
Let's face it. I think we all know that Sessions will get a job.
oh, more than likely.
Well, and Giuliani, same reason. He's going to get a bone thrown to him somehow.
Is Sessions Alabama? Is he?
Yeah.
Alabama. He was the first senator to endorse Donald Trump.
Yeah.
All right, Secretary of Treasury.
One of the Koch brothers.
I
Yeah.
think that's where he can go outside the political. He's probably going to go with some business tycoon or something.
Somebody is being floated around from a business. I think it's a hedge fund manager of some sort.
Mhm.
Steve or
Bear Jr.
Munchin.
München?
I don't.
Munchin.
München.
Yeah.
Oh, there's
Munich.
New York Times also says Tim Pawlenty, possibly former governor of Minnesota, which would be
He's a
interesting.
he's a Republican.
He's a Republican.
He's a
yeah.
Republican.
He tried running in 2000.
We're going to go with the other governor of Minnesota that you were thinking of, Jesse Ventura.
Finally, we're going to audit Fort Knox. We'll see what's in there really.
Okay, the fun one, Secretary of State. I think everyone has an opinion on this one. So we'll just go down the line.
Starting which end?
Starting with Stephen.
I like Carly Fiorina. That's my pick, but probably won't happen.
If we had to go with the Republican, honestly, I think that either for defense or state, I think if he was willing to do it, and if we had to choose a Republican, I think John McCain. He won't do it, but honestly, of the Republicans out there, I think that he would probably be the best person for the job.
I mean, Jordan brings up a good point about McCain, but I don't know, when Steven brought up Fiorina, that kind of sparked my interest a little bit too. I don't think that would be necessarily a bad choice.
Justin?
I really like McCain. I thought about that earlier when we were talking about it, and he seems to be one of the only people who's not afraid to actually push back against Trump and actually do some things on his own accord. He seems tough and ready to fight back and actually have some backbone.
I'm thinking anyone who's level-headed and moderate personality-wise, like McCain or Fiorina.
Throw Jeb Bush back
I mean, maybe not for Secretary of State, but for something, hopefully. But people like that, because I think it's a really important position. It's kind of like the advertisement for the USA, besides the president itself.
And then John.
Kid Rock.
There you go.
Knowing
Gotta
Trump,
get him in there somewhere.
That's how it's going to work.
And I just want to touch on one more thing before we kind of sign off. Actually, two more things. Last thing, Trump wants to get his adult children national security or security clearance. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that they should get security clearance?
No.
I've heard
No. No.
I don't know what kind of organization could sustain itself where the father who's in charge puts his adult children in positions of. You guys get the irony here, right?
You're looking at possible sub-Saharan African dictatorships.
Or St. Joe. Little joke at my expense, everybody. All
Is it
right.
hot in here? Oh God.
No, but seriously, folks.
But no, why? No. I mean, you're running a country, and honestly, from what I understand, they will be running the business, like the family business, the Trump enterprise. Maybe, but honestly, that's one thing that kind of scares me about a Trump administration is how detached is he actually going to be from his business right now. And I don't. And from what I've read, the blind trust that he set up really isn't blind. It's very much he's going to still be involved, and the fact that he also wants to live in the White House part-time makes me highly skeptical.
Part-time.
Part-time.
Yeah,
he wants
part-time.
to. He wants to be able to live between the White House and Trump Tower.
Tied with that very reasoned statement that you made, Jordan, is what happens when something like that, where you could do that very easily in business, Trump starts to find out, hey, I can't run this like I would run a business. There are a lot of obstacles. What does he do then?
What happens when it comes to like an emergency and he's in Trump Tower dealing with his business for whatever reason, and there needs to be a decision made like that in the White House?
Or he delegates to Pence, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. But what kind of? Do you want that kind of president who's well? If it's not a part-time job, that's what I'd say. And for the children having security clearance, my question would be: is why? Like why?
Because they're his closest advisors for
That
Trump.
is ridiculous. Like,
Although I've heard that basically just rumor.
Yeah, I've
Like,
heard that
there's
too.
been no official request. There's no,
Regardless of
I
no-
think there's been a request for
no-
Ivanka's husband, Jared Kushner.
Well, that's
That's
because
different.
Well, he's
But I
he's
think
being named
that's-
senior White House counsel, isn't he?
I believe so. I
Okay.
believe he's getting some type of job in the White House. Definitely not cabinet level position, but
Right.
some type of advisory role.
I mean, regardless on if it's rumor or if it's true that he's trying to get clearance, regardless, it's not smart.
And some would argue that
Yeah.
it's a breach of
Yeah.
national security if like the whole family were involved.
Because if they're anything like him on social media, they'll get out of a meeting and
We know-
Twitter
we
will
know
see
Eric Trump is.
Twitter will see the latest national security.
also, let's face it. I don't think that whenever you hire hire somebody for a job like that, or when you elect somebody, you're not getting the whole family. You're electing the person. You're electing the man. And so the fact that he's trying to say, look, this is, these are my closest advisors, I don't necessarily see that as being good. Honestly, it's going to create a perception issue for him that there's going to be nepotism in the White House, which I don't think is a conversation that he needs or the country needs at this point.
But I don't think he cares. That's just it. He's not going to care about it.
Finally, to end this podcast, like I said, the election was a long 18 months. Do you guys have a personal favorite moment or a moment that sticks out to you in the past 18 months?
when it finished.
When it
What he
finished.
said.
So I'll give you guys some time to think about it. I'll let you know which one mine was. I guess anything that dealt with Bernie Sanders. One of the things I really liked is when that little bird kind of flew on him, and he was just very nice with the bird, and the bird was very nice to him. That was a nice little relaxation point. And also, I think one of my favorite moments too was when Trump was basically playing Celebrity Apprentice with his vice president. It was between him, Jeff Sessions, Newt Gingrich, Chris Christie. I kind of like to see how that played out, and especially how the media kind of picked up on that one. It was actually kind of exciting to watch. So do you guys have any thing like that?
I think for me, my favorite part has been the Joe Biden memes. But
Yes, Joe Biden.
that's
the Obama Biden memes. Those need to be put into a book so I can buy it and I can put it
Oh,
on
man.
my
That's-
coffee table.
Put it in.
it's pretty funny.
National Archives.
I don't know. This whole election was such a blur. Like every time you thought something big happened, you realized that nope, Trump's allowed to say that, I guess. And so it was kind of one of those elections where nothing made sense. And so I think the biggest thing is that when Trump said things, for me, the biggest thing is when he said things, he could say whatever he wanted in whatever manner he wanted and face zero repercussions.
Like you said, he can go up to someone on Fifth Avenue and shoot them, and he wouldn't go down in the polls.
He
Right.
wouldn't,
Mark
yeah.
Cuban said that. That's what Mark Cuban tweeted.
Well,
Um,
Trump said that himself.
Yeah.
Oh, he did?
He,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
said I could shoot
Oh,
someone.
shoot.
Point
and,
blank.
Yeah, and I wouldn't lose any voters or something. And
Yeah.
You'd probably lose the one guy you shot.
Probably. My favorite.
That's the importance of absentee voting.
I almost made the Justin vote. The Justin.
You don't know how many times I
joke.
called someone when I was working with John Gregg, and someone said, I picked up the phone, and they said, "Oh, well, your grandma's really sick, and she's bedridden." You don't know how many times I wanted to say, "Okay, should I send an absentee ballot? Just make sure she votes as soon as possible." You don't know how many times I wanted to say that. Oh my God, Justin.
I think when Bernie was still around, that was when I still had optimism and hope in the American politics. And then after that, everything just kind of slowly ate away at my faith, I guess. And then that night, that was a very sobering night when Trump was elected. That's all I'll say. Very sobering, and I realized that I'm kind of out of touch with things.
I have two. The first one was there was an election ad that Bernie Sanders had before the Iowa caucuses, where he used Simon and Garfunkel's "America" in the background. I think that was just a beautifully crafted, beautifully made, and just almost near perfect campaign ad. It was beautiful. It was positive. It was hopeful, which I really appreciated. And then the second one was at the Democratic National Convention, where you have Khizr Khan saying, "Mr. Trump, I have a question for you. Have you ever read the United States Constitution? If not, I will gladly lend you my copy." That was beautiful. Honestly, I was just like, oh shit, that just happened.
I do have to agree, that one was probably one of my favorite ones too. John, did you have a favorite moment?
I'm pretty disgusted by the whole thing, so I don't have a favorite, I'm afraid. Because although those moments that you're talking about, the Khizr Khan, which was wonderful when he held the Constitution like that, to show that, or in going off of what also Stephen said, all the things Trump could say and face little or no repercussion, in the end made no difference. We're where are we at right now, and that says a lot.
The one Trump ad, though, in the primaries, it was super funny. I don't know if any of you guys saw it. It was on like his Instagram page, but it was the Jeb Bush one. And it literally sounded like a midnight infomercial for like a sleep medication, saying that Jeb Bush is low energy, and then it showed people like sleeping at his rallies. It was quite funny.
If we're talking about political ads, there was also one, Stephen, you showed me about someone running in Texas, I think congressman.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a congressman in Texas.
Oh,
Can you explain
And
that one a little bit,
It
Stephen?
was, so it was a
Please
congressman in
reelect
Texas,
him.
and so basically the moral of the ad is that he's home now, and his wife is just begging for him to get reelected so that he's not home because he thinks he's really funny and wants to help around the house and stuff. It just gets on his wife's nerves.
Well, all he does is he just talks, talks shop. He talks.
Exactly.
He talks
Talks
public
politics.
policy, and it's just like, dude, your wife doesn't want to hear this anymore.
Please.
You're.
Please reelect him.
So any last thoughts about the election before we close it off?
I know one of my favorite moments was because we were talking about Jeb Bush. One of his rallies towards the end of his campaign, he said something really dramatic, and then the crowd kind of stayed quiet, and then he said, "Please clap."
Yeah, that one too.
I remember
Or the Ben Carson, can somebody insult me?
I remember watching that on like the Tonight Show and like all the late night comics were like laughing. And I was like I was feeling so sad for the guy. Like,
There was also an improv group that they had about 15 or 20 people that played all of the major candidates, and there was one where the person who was playing Ben Carson said, this is one of those places where I'd just ask, what would Jesus do? And I think what Jesus would say is, come on guys, the Romans can't kill us all. That sort, and it's just like, oh my God, so perfect.
Nate, so you have a point you want to make?
Yeah. Going on favorite moments, because I didn't put mine in. I was trying to think of them. I have two. One of them is it was early on. Bernie Sanders was at a rally somewhere, and a couple Black Lives Matter activists got on stage and kind of pushed him out of the way and took the mic. And instead of like trying to push him back and start speaking, he just kind of like stood back, let them speak, let them get their views across, and that kind of gave me hope for the election. And then the DNC took the hope away. And my second favorite, actually this might be my favorite, is my my man Ken Bone at the debate. That was definitely one of my favorite ones.
but I've had the rough 60 months too, and it's been like double because
Yeah.
we had Christmas, which was during the primaries, and then we all went home for summer. And I was like, well, I get to escape the whole U.S. election. And I landed right in the middle of a Brexit vote. And I can tell you there that I learned that there's more to voting than people say. Like, a lot of the things in the Brexit vote was about immigration, and there was quite a lot of hostility there. But I think one of the main reasons why Leave won, and it was only by a small margin, just like this election, is because it was just a big middle finger to any kind of establishment or government. Because a lot of experts were saying this, experts were saying that, and people were just like, I don't care about experts anymore. Like, I don't care about the EU, whether I'm in or out. I just want to go against what the establishment is saying. And coming back over to get a nice break from Brexit, I landed right back in the middle of the US election again. I can see similarities with that middle finger towards the establishment for both the Brexit vote and the US election.
If we have time real quick, I want to talk about something Pete just said about that it was a sort of a thumbing of the nose at expertise. I mean, what does that say to you folks who are graduating with degrees in political science, business, or psychology, or what have you, to say, well, I know something about this, and then facing the very real probability that much of the population will look at you and say, I don't care what an expert says.
Listen to what people say. That's what I say. Listen to what they say, and just avoid any type of pretentiousness, because I think that's definitely true on some levels.
I know Pete and I, we have a show called The Ticket that airs on TV6 News.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
So in that one, we kind of blame the media for giving us this false sense of hope that Clinton would win. And I think that did happen. I think the media ignored half of the country, half of the Trump supporters and Republicans when they were talking about the election.
Well, I think part of the problem is that they went for, because the problem with the media is, what do they necessarily care about providing good content? Not necessarily.
No.
That's not going to be their only major. I mean, they want to provide good content, sure, and good quality content, but they also want to make sure that a lot of people watch. And what is the best way to get a lot of people to watch? Controversy. And so whenever you saw reporters talking to Trump supporters on the news, who were they? Like, for instance, The Daily Show, they always went for the crazy ones. They always went for the ones who were just kind of out there, had all the misogynistic, racist kind of stuff that they were spouting, that sort of thing. And so what happened?
Mm-hmm.
People assumed that
Sure,
because
sure.
these are the people on the news, that is how every single Trump supporter was.
Now, I kind of jumped in the middle of John's question, but does anyone else want to answer John's question?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I've seen from this election is that even though you might have the expertise, you have to bring it down to their level. If you talk at them from an elitist perspective, they're not going to listen to you. And that's like, if you look at the Trump campaign, he did it brilliantly. You can't, I mean, all of his words were 1, 2, 3-syllable word if it was a really common word. So he brought it down to
To a third grade level.
Yeah, to the level that the people could understand it and appreciate it and make it seem like he was one of their own.
A third grade reading level, though?
There's so many dimensions to examine the result from now having the benefit of hindsight, but I think the biggest thing is understanding and just trying to understand why people did feel the need to vote for Trump instead of just saying that they're racist, they're
There's
xenophobic.
so much more
There was-
to it.
Yeah, trying to just cast them out as deplorables has only alienated them more and wanted them to push for that kind of stuff. And I think Stephen and Pete made good points about not being pretentious and not saying, I'm right, this is why you're wrong, and this is why I don't care that you're wrong, instead of trying to maybe influence them through saying, this is why maybe what I think could be better for you, but you still think what you want, okay, so you're not a deplorable, you have a different view than me.
Since we were talking about what we like about this election, just hear what we're discussing. I think my favorite part of the election was to be able to talk through these issues with you guys.
We could have went for 3 hours tonight,
We
at
probably
least.
could've. So, I guess.
So,
I just-
so what? This is just an excuse for us to have a support group. Is that what you're
Maybe.
saying?
Yeah.
This is
An
like
election support group.
election therapy.
Basically.
I am a man and I can change
Yeah.
if I have to. I
I'm
guess.
Jose.
So I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. So Stephen, Jordan, Nate, Justin, Pete, John, and then also the other ones that have joined us, Justin Meredith, Brad Parsons, Carlos Branson, Jordan
DeLong.
DeLong. I
There
said
you
it
go.
right, Jordan. And then also a special thank you again to Jeff Brewster, our Director of Instructional Technology. For
without whom none of this is possible.
Really, that is
Really,
actually
yeah.
true, because I do not have the technical skills to.
Or
put
the
on this
equipment.
project- Or the equipment to put on this project. Also, thank you for Lindsay Workin for being part of the panel and also helping Jeff out when she was able to. Did I miss anyone? I think I'm good.
Kinbone.
Ken Bone, thank you. Whoever the creator of the Biden memes, thank you.
Thank you.
And also, just to wrap up, if this election did not go the way you wanted, that's fine. Just keep your head up. And there's a reason why we're called the United States of America. So thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you learn something throughout this journey.